Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's exactly 1 o'clock and we are starting on time, and I can assure you we will finish on time. There's an enormous amount of content that we're going to be covering. Welcome. Thank you for registering. Thank you for attending. Thank you for switching on. I can assure you, you will leave with real value. You will leave with insight. You will leave with practical insights. You will leave with an ability to act immediately, and you will leave, hopefully, with an enormous amount of inspiration around how, from a South African point of view, COVID has ushered in an opportunity for all of us to kill distance, digitize our businesses, and grow right into the center of the world. I want to firstly introduce myself. My name is Pavlo Phitidis. I am a co-founder at Aurik Business Growth. We are an organization that works specifically with the $1 to $30 million annual revenue businesses in 4 continents. We specifically work with them to grow their businesses into what we refer to as assets of value. A business that not only is well positioned in a highly competitive market, but one that secures growth in terms of revenues and profits and ultimately can be sold. I want to start off by thanking PayFast for partnering with Business Day SME Matters. This is one of 4 digitization series we're going to be running. I'm really looking forward to working with PayFast and SME Matters, because I think the work that we're going to be sharing and delivering will be useful and practical for everyone concerned. To give you a bit of a sense, PayFast was founded in 2007. It's trusted now by over 80,000 South Africans. It is growing fast, specifically 80,000 South African merchants, and accepted over 80 platform integrations. Anyone digitizing a business nowadays has to be aware of marketplaces, APIs, integrations. There's no one piece of technology that does everything. In fact, the winners out there are narrow and specialized. And my guest is going to be specifically talking around that in its own right. We are customer-centric as PayFast, and it's helped businesses generate money and revenue, especially during the COVID-19 lockdown. We saw yesterday, right across South Africa, thousands and thousands and thousands of restaurateurs objecting to the overly tight restrictions that seem to have been placed on our economy, preventing people from earning income and making a living. It's in that environment that PayFast has come to life and really provided a tremendous amount of relief. On the screen with me, speaking to you, is Alan Berger, who is a co-founder of InfoSlips. It is a business that was started some time back. Alan has been in technology for over 35 years. I first met him when I interviewed him on a radio show and was very impressed with the technology platform that had been built out from the get-go after being refused funding from multiple sources to start the business. And we're going to be talking about Alan, who's joined us now from... Alan, where are you? You're in Miami, aren't you?
No, in Miami. I'm glad. Well, Miami being the COVID hotspot, I'm not in Miami, but I do stay in Florida. It's the other coast, the Gulf Coast, near a place called St. Petersburg. It's about an hour and a half from Disney. So most people will be able to relate to that.
Fantastic. So it's the early hours of the morning for you. Thank you so much for making time to join us. I'm really looking forward to our discussion. I've made a big promise to all our guests and all our attendees on this webinar, and that is that we are going to race through things at pace, and we're going to be profoundly practical in every sense of the word. And I think you are the ideal counterpart and engagement facilitator guest for me, because you started from nothing with InfoSlips. What is your journey, the early stages of your journey?
I worked at a number of different companies, and at one of those companies the last one, in fact, that I worked at before InfoSlips, we had this idea that documents are really broken, that the way they work, they're just copies of their paper. No real innovation had happened to the format since 1922, when the paper format was invented way back in Germany. And we looked at that. We said we can do better than that. We can create a new document format. We built the product out inside of another company just for the first few months. We took it to the board and said, we want to do this. The board said, stop wasting our time, and shut it down immediately. And so instead of doing that, we got together with the colleagues that had built it, who had faith in it, and we went to them and said, we'd like to leave, and we would like to buy the IP from you. So effectively, we left. We entered an agreement to buy the IP, went to get funding, and did not get any funding, and eventually had to fund it ourselves and bootstrap the company ourselves.
It's amazing what that does, Alan. You know, when you start and you start with a business plan that is intended to raise funding, the amount of money it takes to start the business when you don't succeed at securing funding, you sit back, reflect back, you look at that business plan 3-4 years down the line and say, gosh, imagine had we gotten the funding, this entire endeavor would have cost us at least tenfold more than it did.
Yeah, I can add to that. We had a big fat business plan. InfoSlips turned up being half a page of that business plan. So it focused us so narrowly and made us take the limited resources we have and apply it to the place we believed we could make some revenue, that we actually, I don't think we would have succeeded. We would have had this big ugly monster as opposed to this really narrow focused InfoSlips.
So folks, we're going to now get into the show. Please do send all your questions through the chat function. All of you should be familiar with how the chat function operates and works. Our intention, Alan and mine, is to ensure that you extract and walk out of here at exactly 2 o'clock with real value in your hands. Ask the questions, any questions you want. We are going to go way beyond digitization. We're going to go into business strategy. We're going to talk about how products are built, how products are sold. I want to understand from Alan especially what the competitive environment in the United States is like, how he is currently working with his co-founders and partners in South Africa, right across the pond of the Atlantic, with big time sessions and time hours, as well as into culturally a very, very different environment that shows you what business can look like at massive, massive scale. Alan, very briefly, give us a sense of what InfoSlips is, so we can all hold the image of the product in our mind as you talk through your process of commercialization.
So InfoSlips plays in producing the documents that you get every day in your inbox, or in some people, they get it in paper format, bills, statements, any kind of the documents you get. We looked at those and said they don't work well in the digital world. They don't work well on mobile devices. Anybody who's used a PDF on a mobile device can attest to how you have to pinch and zoom. So we looked at that domain and said, how can we make a new format of digital documents? So we're, as a company, have created that new format. We take information from customers and we send those documents out on behalf of them to their clients in this new generation format.
How did you get your first deal? Because it was a new generation format. It was a brand new idea. Everyone was stuck on the physical slip. And the physical slip, as I understand it, would be my insurance chit, in effect. In other words, the receipt for having paid the premium. Or it would be if I'd gone into, for example, a pharmacy or whatever the case might be, and I was part of a loyalty program of some sort, I would be given, in effect, something to demonstrate that I'm part of this, what my points are, etc., etc. What was that world like? Were there actual physical slips that you were challenging at that point in time?
Luckily, when we started well over a decade ago, paper was still the dominant player, and we had to go in and a lot of times educate clients that they can do it digitally, and they can do it digitally better. And there's a lot of advantages to doing it digitally.
But how did they take you on? Because if you don't,
you're the first client, yeah. First client was Alexander Forbes, in fact, and it was just relationships. I think they landed in a pickle where they needed some help, and we kind of inserted ourselves in that space, and we got our first client, and they're still our client today. And we started just doing pay stubs or pay slips for them, and we've grown now to do an enterprise-wide document composition and delivery for them, and they're still our client today, and we still go on with them. So yeah, Alexander Forbes was our first client, and Microsoft was our second client, in fact.
But here's the thing. They never knocked on your door and said, hey, Alan, we're looking to digitize our slips. How did you approach them right from the get-go? Because There's a process of education, right? When you create a digital product or something innovative, there's a process of education that you have to go through. If you cast your mind right back to those very, very, very early stages, what was it that you needed to do in order to get them to say, yeah, we'll give you a meeting, we're interested?
We had to show them, I think, first of all, that financially it was something that was better, and that what they were currently doing was old school. And we had to, but even more than that, it started on the back of relationships. Our first deal, we knew somebody there who knew us, knew that we could do something clever, and literally took a chance on us. So we actually needed our first customer to take a chance on us, and we partnered with them. We didn't go to them and say to them, buy our product. We kind of said to them, let's build something together for you, and that was the approach.
Okay, so I get it. You've answered my question in practical terms. You went there, you made an offer, you paid for all of it to be done. They simply gave you access, and then on the back of that gave you feedback. And when they realized it worked, they eventually began to pay you.
Yes, correct. I mean, the money we charged, I remember looking at, for the first few months, the amount of money we were making versus the expenses, and it was very sad. But it was the launch pad.
It always feels very sad. You know, when you start up a business and you're excited about the technology and you have spent so much time in it, you can see the opportunities behind it, but getting that communicated in a way that is simple and easy to adopt by especially a corporate client, because Alexander Forbes is a corporate entity. Were you selling into the corporate space specifically, Al, or does this product work right across the span of business?
We operate in many different industries and typically medium to large companies. So what's good about it is people produce documents, people need to send documents to clients, so we can insert ourselves into that into that space. Yeah.
Well, you know, the thing that interests me about the corporate space is it's my profound belief that in South Africa, our corporate environment is not nearly competitive enough. If you look at our sectors and industries, we've got the big four in almost everything. And in those instances, there simply isn't the vibrancy to necessarily innovate. Because my understanding, Al, I don't know what yours has been, is that you only ever innovate out of necessity. Out of necessity being that if I don't do something differently, if I don't change what is not working or what is not driving revenues for me into something that will, the definition change being innovate, I will die. I need to innovate. So in the instance where the big corporate markets within the South African landscape, before we even get to the US, were stable and satisfied with what they were doing, they were chunking out good revenues, they were chunking out good returns. Why? How do you get them to try something new? What do you need to do to get them to stretch beyond that risk of trying something new?
We were lucky in South Africa, and I'm going to put this in quotes because the post office broke in South Africa at some point, okay, and delivery was not guaranteed, and corporates were feeling that pressure to communicate with their clients, and that gave us an opportunity to say, well, here's a digital way of doing it. There were some initial challenges because in South Africa, as you know, it's not everybody, especially when we started, not everybody had access to the latest digital phones and smartphones. So we had to make a product that worked across the board, but in the digital space. So for us, mail being broken, a solution to fill that space for them to improve their communication with their clients is where we slotted in initially.
You know what, Al? I've just recently completed my second book on how to build a business that thrives in a crisis. And I had to research crises. And I found out that the word originated, it's a Greek word, believe it or not. It originated around 300 BC, spelled K-R-I-S-I-S, crisis. And it means a change in the state of health. And when I started to research crises, what I then further learned is that with every crisis, it means a change in behavior. When the thing goes wrong, whatever the thing may be, whether it be COVID, whether it be the global credit crunch, whether it be the South African Postal Service literally collapsing in front of us, whether it be Eskom in the instance of South Africa, whenever there's a crisis, businesses have to respond, and the response is better received in crisis than when things are steady. Has that been your experience too?
For sure. In fact, it was very stark, and I know we're going to get to the US now, but the stark difference between South Africa and the US. In the US, a lot of things that like the post office here is still functioning. In South Africa, it wasn't, but that has made us more innovative. It actually set us up so strong that when we got here and started showing our product and started trying to get customers, that the things that we had to innovate in because out of necessity in South Africa became something that is very valuable here in the US.
Okay, so you grew successfully in South Africa for how long, El, before you breached the borders of South Africa? What did you achieve prior to that very, very, very first moment?
So we built out our client base in South Africa, and well, in short, we should have gone international a lot earlier. There was a lot of, we were worried about it, and even though there was still good runway in South Africa for our product, in hindsight, it would have been better to go earlier. But in terms of South Africa, for us, there was a lot of clients in a lot of industries, and we expanded our product and grew.
The mistakes that you made when you were building out your product, were they, in your view, and using a bit of retrospection now that you're in the US, was South Africa a good, in effect, test bed or incubator in order to get that right? Were South African companies perhaps more forgiving when things didn't work out as planned than perhaps that might be the case in the US?
A little bit different for our experience. Our experience is that, and maybe it's built because of relationships, and it's always harder. It's always easier to do something when you're in an environment where you know people, and business is built on relationships. But I found the South African businesses were less risk, were prepared to take more risk with us than initially the American companies were. So if we had started here in America, it might have been a lot harder because we would have not found companies that as easily that would have wanted to do what we wanted to do. In South Africa, because of relationships, history, and the pressure of the market and the industries like the post office and other challenges, we found companies that were willing to take a risk with us. That set us up really well in terms of getting the product matured and working. So I think the opposite for me. I think South African businesses are, in some ways, we are, this might sound crazy, I believe that in a lot of cases, like banking, where you mentioned earlier, we are way more advanced in South Africa. I still have a checkbook, for interest sake, okay, in the US. I haven't had a checkbook for, I think, 15 years in South Africa. I got you to have a checkbook, so it's crazy. Some things are, so in America, all I'm saying is that there's a lot of opportunity to use our South African tech.
We've got some nice questions coming through. Mario, thank you very much. I know that you're in the lighting and electrical maintenance environment. There's a nice question from Hein over here about product testing. For a sole proprietor becomes very difficult. Of course it does. We certainly going to cover those questions. We'll get through those questions in a lot more detail based on the running order that I have in front of me. But Alan has just raised something really interesting about the difference between the US and South Africa. What I have certainly found, we opened up firstly in Chicago. And I recall going to visit the series of banks over there. There were the big brand banks, international banks that spanned right across the globe. And then there were the regional, what were referred to as community banks. And I remember sitting down, being questioned by the account attendee, whoever you might call this person, the business development individual. And he asked me a whole lot of questions about why we were opening up the business and what we intended to do. And I started to get a little bit nervous at some point. And then he sat down and he said, okay, can you please wait for a minute? I need to call the bank manager. And the bank manager then arrived, and I was terrified because the only time you ever meet a bank manager in South Africa is when you normally are in trouble. And the bank manager sat down and started to interrogate me further. And I turned around and I said, look, I don't know what is going on over here, but if you feel that I'm not a suitable client, I'm very happy to move on to the next bank. And he looked at me confused and he said to me, I don't understand your question. He said, the reason I'm asking you all these questions is so I can understand your business. Because beyond a simple banking product, why would you come to us if we can't add more value than simply transactions and cards? And I was quite taken aback. So from a small business point of view, I find a massive difference between the banks here and the community banks, which are so well known in the States. When you opened up your accounts there, did you go for big brand banks or did you go for community banks?
Initially, I went for Bank of America and had the opposite experience. It was just kind of a number kind of thing, and it didn't really work out. The appointment was sort of clinical, and we got an account. But when I got here, and that was before we even moved to the States, but when I got here, we changed to a local bank, a bank called Regions, and of which in this kind of category there's over 1,000. So just to put your head around how big that middle tier banking market is that we don't have. And I had the same experiences.
Yeah, good experiences. So at some point in time, you decided to cross the pond. Your product had been built over here. It was working over here. How many digital slips were you operating in South Africa before you breached across into the US, Al?
I think more than 10 million or so a month, I think. Yeah, somewhere in that kind of space. Yeah.
So did that give you a good sense of how to build a really scalable platform, a reliable platform? Did that aid in giving you the confidence to step across the pond?
Well, we stepped across the pond, sort of dipped our toes into the international market before, and it very became apparent actually that our first generation tech that we had, remember we were over a decade old company, wasn't going to cut it. So 5 years ago or so, we started re-engineering our platform completely for the cloud and for all a modern technology stack. But the experience of how to do volumes, plus the experience now of this, plus the advantage of this new generation stack, set us up well for the international market.
When you architect the design of your product, your digital product, referring really to the question over here from Hein in many ways, when you're busy building a digital product in a sense, do you take a view that you have an idea, you're now going to map out the idea, you're going to code it into significance, and then you're going to take it to market? Or did you take a more agile approach when you first built out the platform for InfoSlips?
A little bit of both. You have to take something to the client. So we started with kind of what our idea was, but it very, very rapidly changed and was molded as we started engaging with our first clients. Our first set of clients, our friendly clients, our tenant clients, the anchor clients, if you want to think of them that way, we worked with them. We went to them very clearly. This is a new product. We'll work with you. Let's build it to what makes sense for you. I just want to add one point to that, and that is that even though we were building things to meet that client's needs, we always took the generic and the picture view, the sort of more holistic view over the top of it. So we said, well, this feature that this client wants, can we turn it into something that's not just for this client, but something that works, adds to the whole platform and becomes an advantage for all future clients. So that's the way. We started with something simple, and then we molded it over time based on feedback. So an agile approach.
And that, the process of redoing that development again and again and again. You know, I'm always fascinated by people who think and believe that you build once and you scale forever thereafter. In the tech businesses that I've built, we've had to rebuild the platform 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times with every iteration. Firstly, the technology's changed. Programming language became more efficient and more effective. What we used before, what we use now is fundamentally different. How many iterations have you been through, Al? And how do you work with your partners to argue the funding required in order to get it right each and every time?
So we've been through fundamental complete redesign only twice, and then maybe one more where we went through a major revision of the product. But that said, to talk to your first point, software is never ever finished. It's just you've got to resign yourself to the fact that because of market conditions, client requirements, technology changes, that your product is never finished, and you're building product forever. It's either adding new features, refining, or making it more efficient. And to talk to your question about the partners, everything we did, we put through the focus lens of, will it save us money, make it more automated and easier to do? So in other words, less work for us to do to bring in that same revenue or revenue from a client. That was the first lens. And then the second lens was always, will this if we add this feature, would we be able to charge more for it or a premium for it? And so either automating, making less work for ourselves was the first criteria, or adding feature, more revenue. And then it's much easier to justify and get buy-in from all the parties inside the business.
Now, you raise a very, very interesting point over there, because if we talk about automation, there are two elements to it. There is the product or service that you offer, which you typically sell as a solution to a client. And then you have all the business processes that are required to generate leads, convert leads, fulfill your obligations to those leads, manage staff performance, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The good old business, let's call it operating procedures and processes. Do you separate out your product completely from those operating processes, or do you have them integrated and stitched together in some shape?
Well, our product is our service, if you want to think of it that way. What we're doing is our product is our service. So from that perspective, a lot of the stuff is integrated. We have two philosophies. The one is for the stuff that is kind of, if you want to call it routine, the financials, the payroll, those types of things, we outsource ourselves. We want to be lean and agile, so we outsource those features. But anything that's with our product, delivering to our customers, fulfilling our obligations, that we are in-house. And to that effect, we will automate that and have tools for that. So we use everything from, and we run an agile shop, but at the end of the day, we use tools like Zoho and Jira and a number of other tools like that inside the organization to manage and drive all the processes.
It's such an interesting debate, that, Al, because, I had a debate fairly recently. Well, not fairly recently. I suppose it's an old debate now. It was about 7 years ago with one of the biggest mining houses in the world and in South Africa. And the question was asked, well, what do you think of the business? And the analogy that I came up with was really that every business ought to see itself as an onion. If you slice an onion in half, you have the sweet center, you have the middle layer, and you have the outer layer. And everything that's in the center that is absolutely core and strategic to your existence, in other words, that you need, that without which you can't exist justifiably, you need to own. And as you migrate from the inside sweet center of the onion to the outside skin, you can start to outsource more and more and more. And it raises an interesting debate. When do you buy an off-the-shelf piece of software, and when do you program something on a bespoke basis, on a proprietary basis that you own it? From a product point of view, how do you see that?
So when you're evaluating something, there's going to be sets of features that you have to have kind of like plumbing to your system. And there's going to be things that are going to make you competitively or differentiated from your competition. So that's the first kind of, so when you're doing something that's going to be your own IP that will differentiate you, that nobody else is doing, well, you tend to have to build that and but there's other things like, I'll give you a practical example. Our system has to send emails when we're in the cloud. We didn't build the whole email infrastructure. We just leveraged Amazon's email infrastructure to do that. So we just use their API. So in a lot of cases, our product is more than the sum of its parts, because it's not just our IP, but we've hooked in all these different services that are available on the web these days. And that's not unique to us. That's the way software works these days. There's very few shops that are building the whole stack from the ground to the top floor themselves. To remain competitive, agile, to be quick to market, to have the best capabilities, they have to have that balance between using external services and APIs and or building yourself in terms of IP and product.
Yeah, it also then goes further, because if I look at you and your partners, all of your engineers, if I recall in one of our earlier discussions, you came from a tech background. You were very comfortable with technology. You had a good understanding of programming, of design, of digital product in many ways. But let's say I am, for example, Mario, who is in the lighting sector, and I install products, I buy products, I create products, but they're physical products. They're not technology products per se. And I want to start looking at digitizing certain elements of my business. How do I approach Without a technology background, without your engineering and electrical engineering background, where do I even begin to understand whether I'm having the wool pulled over my eyes or not by a software development house? How would you approach that very, very first iteration or experience?
Unless you're doing something unique these days, there's not always a reason to develop something. Let's start there. So you don't always have to go through this route of hire developers and build something. There's a lot of software out there that you can, do your research on, like anything else. You can go in there and go, well, I need to do accounting. I need the best accounting, or I need to do CRM, or I need to do whatever business function they are. There's a lot of software out there. There's a lot of reviews. Peer reviews, customer reference calls, for the off-the-shelf software. It gets more complicated when you have to build something. There you need to find trusted partners. But once again, you can do your due diligence on them, and you can start small and scale. And if you're starting small and it's not working out, that's less risk, and you can sort of stop the bus and try something else. So that would be my advice.
And Mauro, you know what? I would add to what Alan has just said. The thing about building digitization into your processes, if you think about what digitization is, it's simply about automating certain aspects of the business or mechanizing them even. It's very expensive when you don't get it right, because you're paying for integrations, you're paying for software development, you might be acquiring a piece of off-the-shelf software. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of apps out there that you can acquire. In each instance, you have to learn about the app, you have to understand the app, you have to learn about the interface. When it doesn't work out, it feels like you have lost and burnt a huge amount of time. The starting point always needs to be an answer to the question, what makes my business special? Alan said something earlier, which I'm going to pick up on. He said that we had to narrow more and more and more and more from the original business plan to the product that eventually worked, against which they've now built an international business. It was that process of narrowing. So to answer your question, how would you approach it within your labor-intensive lighting electrical maintenance environment? There are two aspects to that. The first thing is you need to understand who you serve, because who you serve gives you a good sense of what problem you solve, and more importantly, it'll give you a good sense of what experience they want in order to support you. So for example, if you know that your customer or potential customer is reading certain media, you know then where to market your service. When you market your service, there are a whole lot of digitized applications you can use. Everything from LinkedIn to Facebook, all the way through to more interesting platforms. Al, I see you adding and nodding your head. How do you market beyond, obviously, pavement pounding, the good old traditional way?
The way we go is via resellers. Our product, as much as it's a platform and it's clever technology that we spoke about, nobody buys clever technology. People buy a solution to what they have. And to do that, you need to package and make sure that your product is configured for particular industries, whether it be insurance, investment, wherever you want to sell. So marketing, to talk to the marketing point of that, we partner with customers or with resellers for our product that are in a particular market. They're in financial services or banking or insurance or HR or whatever it may be. So we partner with them. We give them the value proposition that dovetails with their existing value proposition. And then they take that to their existing clients and new clients as part of their offering to clients. So our way of marketing and going to market is through those partners. Those partners also have the normal kind of above-the-line marketing, whether that be above and below-the-line marketing, whether it's LinkedIn or those other social media platforms as well. And we'll work with them to help them with that.
So that is a really interesting contribution, because channels is not a well-established concept in South Africa. It is in certain elements. So in the mining sectors, you find it. In the automotive sectors, you find it. But mostly, for most wide-ranging businesses, channels are not very familiar. So Mario, there you have it. You have already an opportunity to reach your customers and clients using social media, and there are a whole lot of software products you can use to manage that very effectively. Or you can establish a physical access to your clients through collaborators. And that really feeds nicely into the question over here from, who asked me about collaboration over here? It was Stephanie. For businesses that are just not tech savvy, would you suggest collaboration? How could you implement these collaborative efforts? What specific actions would be worthwhile testing? So Al, you approach a channel, a systems integrator that you're going to work with. What do they want from you? What do you want from them? How do you evaluate each other, and how do you get that deal done?
I just want to take one step back and say that it's not always a system integrator. Sometimes it's just somebody who's doing business in the area that we want to have our product. We'll bring the product sometimes. Sometimes they have a product, as you talk with a system integration that will integrate you, but they don't always have a product. Sometimes they're just delivering a physical software product. I mean, they have a product that they're selling to their clients, whether it's consulting, whether it's services, whether that's implementation, whatever it may be. We will then see what they do a gap, not a gap, but a more of analysis between our two products and say, we can supplement what they do, and then make it a value proposition that they take to market together. Yeah.
So Stephanie, I think it answers the question about collaboration. If you really think about what collaboration requires, it needs a few things. Firstly, if in doing what you do, the partner you want to collaborate also does that, it's unlikely you will ever find a comfortable relationship. You need to stick to your knitting, they need to stick to their knitting, and in many ways, what you do and what they do, 1 + 1 should equal 3 in terms of value for the customer that they've got access to. The second thing is, and correct me if I'm wrong, Al, you've got to make it so easy for that channel partner to not only sell, but to also integrate the solution into their customer on your behalf.
Yeah, you need to remove all the barriers effectively. And that's not only technical barriers in terms of making systems work together in some cases. It's also in terms of marketing, pitch, value proposition, business case, pricing, marketing, all of that. You need to kind of make that as easy as possible and guide them through the process. Don't expect them just to do it, but work with them, with our experience to get our product to market through their channel.
So in effect, the channel is saying to you, Alan, listen, I've got access to this bunch of customers. They would definitely see value in InfoSlips. Help me sell it to them with me doing the least amount of work necessary, making money in the process, and not losing my customer because things don't work out. If you answer those 3 questions, you in effect are winning with channel, aren't you?
Yes. Also, to add to that would be, if they go into a particular customer ready to sell their product and services, and your product just becomes a natural extension as much as possible, not something that's extra that just comes from left field at the customer, but the customer's in that space and they're doing that, and this product now is just there in their tool set or in their arsenal to help service that customer better, to improve the value proposition for that customer, or to solve a problem for that customer. That's the best, because they're at the customer, they're selling their own product, and this is just not going along for the ride, and it fits seamlessly into that space.
But you need to keep it alive, because they might be representing 4, 5, 6 other products as well. How do you stay front of mind in their heads so that when they are visiting their customers, your product or solution certainly gets folded into the service that they eventually offer?
Well, the short answer is we're doing it with them, not for them, or they're not doing it for us. What I mean by that is that if they're visiting customers or in those processes, often we will be along for the ride. Second of all is communication, and more communication. We meet with partners once a week, sometimes more often. We set up communication channels that are way more efficient than email, like we use tools like Slack and Teams to communicate with them, so that there's an ongoing, constant communication and feedback. We know every opportunity they're working on. We know what they're doing, when they're doing it, and we're looking at them going, hey, you could do this better. Here, how about this? Should we do this for you to make it easier for you? Can we prepare that for your next pitch? So we're doing all of that kind of stuff. So it's not kind of drop and forget. That will never work. In fact, we've tried that in the past. It doesn't work.
So Alan, does it raise a challenge for you when you work through channels? Because in effect, when you work through a channel, you're not working at the cold-faced lived experience of the customer itself, themselves. Does that rob you of insights into how to make changes, small incremental changes and adjustments to your product? Or does it give you information that is secondhand and perhaps coming down the pipe a little later than it ought to be?
Yeah, that is a trade-off that you make with channel partners. If the channel partner is not very communicative, but often if we're implementing a project, we might have a resource from our side with them implementing a project. So sometimes we'll get more direct feedback, but you make a valid point. Sometimes you are getting it a little bit secondhand, and it's a little bit harder, but we try and, but you've got so many partners out there and channel partners and resources that aggregately, I think we're still getting what we need to improve the product and to drive and to improve processes. Yeah.
Okay, so you've established yourself in Florida. You're operating InfoSlips out of Florida into the American market. When you arrived there, you already had clients over there, correct?
Yeah, well, it started with Mercedes-Benz. I always say from Swartkorps to Detroit, okay, because Mercedes-Benz is in Detroit here, in special Farmington Hills, just outside of Detroit. And we had a client that here in South Africa, Mercedes-Benz, that took our product to some showcase event in Germany. They won some kind of award, and then we used that as a leverage point to get an introduction here to Detroit and land them, Mercedes-Benz here as a customer. And that was kind of the first event. We needed a first tenant client, that first little hook onto the continent to go. When you talk to a customer here, it's not just we've got a customer somewhere else in Africa or other places. We've got this customer, Mercedes-Benz, brand name, they're using us. You want to pick up the phone and talk to them, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay, so if I'm building my business here, I want to internationalize my business. I'm going to start chasing in South Africa the multinational corporates with the view to ensure that if I hook in with them and do well over here, will the country manager of a multinational in South Africa be taken seriously in the UK or the US? How do you get that part of it right? It's an unfair question. It's a tough question.
Yeah, there's no easy answer to that. Sometimes they are. Mercedes-Benz were lucky that they won this international. So it wasn't just South Africa. They won an award from the head office effectively, because they have an innovation competition that runs throughout the organization. So that brought us some credibility. But also when we got here, they still had a need. I mean, it wasn't just that they liked our product. They had a need. They hadn't found a solution to it, and so that also formed the next basis. But there's no easy answer. Sometimes people don't take Africa seriously, even in multinationals. They go because sometimes the South African business is a P in terms of revenue compared to a huge amount of revenue that they do here. So it's not something that they pay a lot of attention to. In some cases, not all cases.
Okay, so you in the days that we could fly, you hopped onto an airplane, you hopped across the pond, you established yourself in the US. What happened then? How did you communicate with your partners in South Africa? And what do you rely on for service out of South Africa? And what did you have to build locally over there?
So for us, it was kind of a two-pronged approach coming over here. The one prong was, yes, as we spoke about, getting a customer here as a tenant client. But just in parallel, I was looking for partners, okay? And I happened to find, after many flights and trips, I managed to find a really great partner that took us seriously, that went whole hog with us. They really went in full ball with us. And so those two events, having a customer, having a partner, then we established a company here. I must tell you that the visa processes and things aren't easy, but effectively established a company here, opened bank accounts, applied for the correct visas, had me transferred from the South African entity to this entity, to run the business here. Then it was basically, it felt like I was starting up the initial InfoSlips business actually, because I knew nobody knew us. But with the partner, with the tenant client, we slowly kind of caught up. Then we got Duke Energy, which is like an Eskom, but way bigger on a bigger scale. We got them as our second client, and then slowly that helps. But it's slow, and it's still we're nowhere near mature and as far down the road as we're in South Africa. In terms of leveraging South African resources as much as we can. In fact, you always talk about the time difference being a penalty. We haven't found that. We found the time difference being an asset. Why? Because we'll be talking with our partners to clients. During the day, we'll get requests and things that maybe we need the South African business to service. Those will go into our communication channels. We use Slack and a number of other tools, Jira, etc. Those will all go into those tools. South Africa will wake up tomorrow morning. have all that stuff to do. They will respond while I'm still sleeping. I'll wake up here sort of early in the morning, and I have a whole lot of answers and feedback to the clients or the partner, because I also deal directly with the partner, will have the answers. So in a lot of ways, we're turning around quick. The time difference is allowing us to turn around things quicker than maybe if we were in the same time zone.
That must leave an incredible impact on a client. Because comparatively, if you're competing with, let's say, businesses in the local environment there, they might have a 12, 13, 14, 15-hour turnaround, and you are in effect having about a 3 to 5 hour turnaround.
Yes, for us, we've had those kind of comments from clients. Duke Energy gave us that was the best project they ever ran. And the reason was because we'd be so responsive to them. They couldn't believe that they asked for something and they got it so quickly. And that's not just about the time difference. That obviously played to our advantage, but it also meant having the people, processes, to be able to address those in the organization. So we do a combination of partner resources and our back in South Africa resources. And currency differences and slick processes make that actually, I think, works in a way a lot better than maybe sometimes even a local business.
Do you find when you engage with businesses in the US, comparatively looking at similar businesses here in South Africa, where do we have strength? Where do they have strength? What can we learn from them around being competitive? You said when you started the business, you had a big fat business plan. It really turned out eventually, because you weren't funded, to be the half-page business plan. When you went to the States, did you have to narrow down further and focus even more into a niche than you were in South Africa? Could you be broader in South Africa, but required to be narrower in the US?
In a way. And what I mean by that is that InfoSlips works in a whole lot of different industries, as we mentioned earlier, wealth, financial, HR, etc. When we came here, we didn't have the resources to be able to have that. We had partners in South Africa in all these different industries that were taking us to market. Our first partner that we got here, a company called Nike DX out of Charlotte and a number of other places in the US, they were in financial services. So we started with financial services, and that is our strongest industry here. But as we're growing, and we're finding new partners, we're getting back to doing a broader offering again.
In South Africa, when you do business development with digital products, is it sufficient to have a really good understanding of the product, of course, as you would in any instance, but is it sufficient for you to have, let's say, 1 or 2 business development members in your team that can work across sector? Does that apply in the States, or in the States, do you have to pick your sector, within the sector, pick an industry, and within the industry, when you have business development activity, do you need to have a deeper understanding of the industry than you would otherwise over here?
Actually, no, I might contradict. No, I don't think so. I mean, you have to have a good, regardless of where you are, you need to, if you're talking to a client, you've got to have really good knowledge of their industry. And that comes back to that channel partners. Those channel partners that we have, they have a good knowledge. So the combination of their knowledge, your product, and then cross-pollination of that knowledge into your organization and vice versa is what makes you strong. So the customer is always getting a very targeted offering for him, because between us and the partner, we're doing exactly that target. So we didn't have to narrow. Well, in a way, we were forced to narrow through the partner network. Let's put it that way.
Oh, the difference between South Africa and the US from a digitization point of view, are you finding South African firms positively inclined? I'm talking pre-COVID. So pre-COVID, were South African firms positively inclined towards mechanization, automation, digitization as a process? How would you compare the environment here in South Africa to what you've experienced in the US?
I found that we were further along in South Africa in terms of digitization pre-COVID. Here, it depended on industry and companies, etc. But beyond those big companies that we always see in the press, Facebook and Google, etc., there are literally millions of smaller mid-tier companies, and some of them are so archaically driven. They're still doing print and post because that's worked for them, and it's been it's a forgotten part of their company that just works, and it's a cost center that's sunk, and they didn't even think about it. And getting on planes and flying all over the country has been the way they do it, and it worked, and it was efficient, and I put that in quotes, but it worked, and they could get on a plane and they could do it. So I found that when I came here, I was surprised how we were actually more advanced in terms of the way we did stuff digitally. And obviously, you said not COVID, but now that COVID's happening, that landscape has changed dramatically to our advantage. Yeah.
Completely. And I think it's accelerated in every business right across the world. I want to start drawing to a close. We have 10 minutes left. I'm looking at the questions coming through over here. Josh, can you see uniquely South African business opportunities to seize in the digital space? Again, from Mario, how would we do what we do with corporate clients? In other words, how do we create a digitized marketing solution for corporate clients? And from Stephanie over here, the digital space being so competitive with limited knowledge and finances, are there easy ways in which we can stand out? So I'll tell you what Alan and I are going to do. We're going to build a digital business. We're going to build it here in South Africa right now, El, in about 9 minutes. So okay. Let's pick a business. The first thing we're going to do is there are many, many businesses out there that we can elect to offer as a service. And let's turn around and say we are going to run a business that builds specifically these pens, a simple pen, right? No, a cup business, It's a physical product that we're going to build. We're going to build it here in South Africa, and we're going to digitize it into the existence of the entire world. So the first thing we have to get right is, well, we have to decide why we do what we do, right? What will this business be? Let's think about it. Cups, there are many different types of cups. There are decorative cups. There are thermal cups. There are small cups. There are artistic cups. There are throwaway cups, there are tin cups, there are paper cups, there are plastic cups, there are ceramic cups, there are cups for every occasion. Could you even have started entering into the States, Al, if you did not decide crisply and clearly who you serve, what problem you solve for them, and what experience they need in order to do business with you here first?
Yeah, 100%. You have to know exactly what product it is, and you need to understand how it will solve that customer's problem. And you also need to have a handle on the competitive landscape and how you compare to those customers, to the existing customers. So in terms of a cup, you'd have to do something that there's a need for, first of all. So you've established that there's a need, and you're going to build a cup for that particular need that is hopefully not serviced by too many other people, because obviously they'll be your competitors.
Okay, so the first piece is, if you try and be all things to all people, you will never succeed. Not going across the pond, you won't even succeed over here. So let's decide that we're going to focus in on thermal cups, because I've just seen you drink from one, and that's a nice idea. It's a thermal cup. There we go. And this was not pre-planned. I've got Alan on the spot. I've got myself on the spot. We're going to service thermal cups. The first thing we have to understand is, who do we serve? In other words, who sees value in a thermal cup? Because if you want to start marketing to get your product out and your message out, and you don't know who it is you're trying to reach, then you won't even succeed in getting the marketing message out. You wouldn't even know who to have your first engagement with, Al.
Yeah, I agree completely. You need to be targeted. You need to know what you sell. You need to know what the advantage is. And if it's a thermal cup, you need to understand that there are other thermal cup companies out there, and how are you going to differentiate? It could just be on price. It could also be on some kind of feature that you've seen that cups don't do. Yeah.
So you could even narrow it down further then. You could turn on and say, well, we are going to supply thermal cups specifically to mountain climbers, as opposed to just general thermal cups. And the narrower you get, the closer you can get to understanding who you need to reach. And when you engage with who you need to reach, they will tell you what problem a thermal cup solves for them. They will tell you that they read Mountaineering magazine digital only. You don't need to advertise on radio. You don't need to advertise on TV. You can reach them through that. They will tell you what they value in the content that they read. And that's where the beginning of this entire process comes from, because if you've understood that, you can then find the most appropriate piece of technology to support all your marketing campaigns that you would run. You can find something that you can leverage through Facebook or through LinkedIn or through digital magazines that you buy advertising into that focus on mountain climbers that look for tall, hard to climb mountains. It is the beginning of creating a niche within a niche within a niche. And I learned that, Alan, from the businesses we work with in the States. Every single one of those businesses have got five things in common. The first is they have focused, Al, on a niche within a niche within a niche. They have gone so narrow, arguing that that narrow slice can build a $100 million business globally. Have you found that the narrower you've gone, the better the penetration has been into those industries?
Yeah, I think that goes hand in hand with you going narrower means that you're going to, the person that's got that problem, you're going to target that problem better. It's a bit like sort of having a cream for a generic cream versus a cream for something that's actually a problem, so you're getting right to the heart of that person. I mean, you obviously have to make sure that enough of those people exist when you go niche within niche. Second of all, from my perspective, is you need to take that risk and start, but be prepared. Maybe if you do mugs, maybe do a small batch, put them out there, and that'd be more expensive, and you're not really going to make money on the first batch, but get the feedback back, make that a loop, maybe give them away, maybe get mountain climbers to take them to the top of somewhere, but get their feedback of what's working, what's not working, and very quickly be prepared to refine it, or even to say, I made a mistake, let's try something else, a different type of cut, for example.
And literally, that's where the process of digitizing would start. If your product can't be digitized, all your business processes can be. In other words, your process of marketing, which is lead generation, can be digitized. The process of selling can be supported through a whole series of softwares that help you build pipelines, that manage the stage gates as you progress a client to acquiring the physical cup itself. The process of distribution, communication, fulfillment, dispatch, all of that can be digitized. But it won't be successfully done if you first don't understand what business you're in. The second thing you need to get right, if we listen carefully to the engagement that we've had around InfoSlips, you need to understand how you go about doing your business. You need to understand what your business processes are. And then thereafter, you can find the most appropriate technology to digitize elements and aspects of that, which will yield you all the benefits and gains. Al, we've got 3 minutes left. What are the 3 big mistakes you made that we can learn from?
I think the first one for me is I don't know if I'll get to 3, but the first one for me is having more faith in that South Africa is as competitive, and that means that you can take your product internationally. I think we were always kind of like, we're going to get here and there's going to be all these people who do everything we do but way better, and we're going to be outgunned, and it's going to be so I would have done it earlier. And then also I would have maybe in South Africa been more niche focused initially. We kind of started and then kind of went all over the place, and then kind of came back after all those life lessons of, well, we can't be everything to all people. We need to do a few things well. So I would have, maybe not taken that hiding would have made us a lot more advanced, or maybe along the journey, not further down the journey. Those are the 2 that I can think of right now. Yeah.
The 2 things you've done that really worked well that you would have loved to have doubled down on?
I think once again, it comes down to industries. It would have been for us to build industry solutions sooner. We started with a generic platform and said, please come buy this platform. And we only later got into the industry. So I would have done that quicker, and I would have doubled down on building more industries sooner, solutions for industries, and taking that to market. And then I would have done the international thing earlier if we had the courage or the buy-in, basically.
So in effect, you're saying believe in yourself. That's really what it is. If you find success here in South Africa, you will find success in markets that you go into. Digitization enables processes. It makes it quicker, easier, faster, perhaps cheaper, if not cheaper, more efficient. Have the courage to invest in it. Alan, thank you so much for getting up early. Thank you so much for giving us time. I want to thank all of you who have attended this event. Thank you so much for the questions you pushed through to Alan and I. I have 30 seconds left, and that 30 seconds has to go to PayFast. Thank you so much, PayFast, for making this possible. We really look forward to the next event. The next event will be on Tuesday, the 25th of August. Alan, I'd love to have you attend that as well. I certainly notified your team at InfoSlips that you and I will be having yet another fantastic conversation. Thanks very much for the inspiration, the insight, the practical advice, and Alan, make us proud over there. We need South African business, Springboks, Proteas, Bafanas, call it what you will. You are certainly one of them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Just on a closing note, there are a lot of South Africans over here making a success of their businesses. I'm so surprised to learn that there's more than you think. Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised at all. We have a natural resilience with what we've had to put up with and what we've had to survive, and we take it for granted. Thank you very much again, Alan. I shall certainly speak to you in the near future. And to all of you who attended and listened to Alan and listened to myself, thank you again. And I really look forward to hosting you at the next event.